Yip. Man Hei Yip is assistant professor of systematic theology at Wartburg Theological Seminary in Dubuque, Iowa, and earned her Master of Arts in Theology, Development, Evangelism, and a Master's of Sacred Theology at Wartburg Seminary, and then went and received a PhD at Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, now part of United Lutheran Seminary. She has taught in Hong Kong, Philadelphia, and Dubuque, as well as been a visiting researcher at Boston University School of Theology in connection with the Center for Global Christianity and Mission. She has spoken on justice, peace, and sustainable development to the Lutheran World Federation and the World Council of Churches, and has authored her book, Interrogating the Language of Self and Other in the History of Modern Christian Mission, Contestation, Subversion, and Reimagination, published in 2020 by Pickwick, and has book chapters in Truth-Telling and Other Ecclesial Practices of Resistance, 2021 by Fortress, The Lord's Prayer Petition in Luther's Small Catechism, an exposition on the Christian faith in Asian contexts and cultures, 2019 by Christian World Imprints, as well as a chapter in Global Lutheranism, Vitality and Challenges, 2018, Lutheran University Press. It's my privilege to welcome my colleague in Lutheran Seminary education, Man Hei Yip, and I look forward to hearing what she has to tell us today. Welcome, Man Hei.
Thank you so much, David. Greetings, everyone. My topic today, can you all hear me? Good. Good, thanks. My topic today is diaconia at the edge, repositioning and respacing love in action through a diasporan perspective. Can you all see the screen? Can you all see my screen? Thank you so much. Once again, the topic is diaconia at the edge, repositioning and respacing love in action through a diasporan perspective. So what does diaconia of all believers mean when there are bodies that are in exile? What does diaconia of all believers mean when there are bodies that are in exile? I will come back to that, but for now, I would like to talk about why diaspora matters in our discussion here. The term diaspora was originally used to refer to the dispersion of Jews in different periods of time, and later describe the forced displacement of certain peoples. Diaspora now generally means those who identify with a homeland, but live outside of it. That includes not only first-generation immigrants, but also foreign-born children of these individuals, as long as they maintain some link to their parents' home country. These links, whether cultural, linguistic, historical, religious, or affective, are what distinguishes diaspora groups from other communities. So diaspora, it's not anything new, nor even the subject, just another new fad. Given the widespread political protests and turmoil around the world in recent years, the movement of people from one place to another has sharply increased and simultaneously enlarged the diasporic populations. The definitions of diaspora can no longer be limited to the stories of immigrants and or ethnic communities and their relationship to the wider society. all that necessitates an alternative way of understanding the new diaspora, together with their challenges, dreams, ways, and aspirations. The new diaspora, termed by Mark H. Ellis, who is retired professor of Jewish Studies and director of the Center for Jewish Studies at Baylor University, specifically emphasizes that these are the people who are more than looking for economic opportunities, but struggling for freedom and liberation, and sometimes maybe simply holding political opinions different from the dominant voice. The point here is not just about what more we can add to the definition of diaspora, but also why the bodies in exile matter, and how might the diaspora, including the displaced, help reposition and respace the contour of diaconia in the midst of rising authoritarianism, both at home and abroad. In the introduction of the new diaspora and the global prophetic, Toussaint Schultz and Santiago Slabowski rightly observed that people have been in the streets across the world protesting corrupt politics, garnering the courage to resist injustice, and imagining alternative worlds. People are marching and demonstrating in many different places, from the United States to France to Ukraine, from Brazil to Chile to Puerto Rico, and from Algeria to Zimbabwe to Hong Kong. This new diaspora is a community that has no borders. It is a network of political, cultural, and religious exiles who have been witness to injustice and to life abundance. To Ellis, this scattered group of people honor the shattered fragments of diverse cultural heritages and faith commitments, and want those fragments to be shared with fellow exiles without the desire to recreate an idolatrous whole. They are bound together by the prophetic, expressed in diverse linguistic and symbolic formations, so that the exilic journey will be characterized by fidelity and thus not be in vain, thereby bequeathing justice, seeking compassion, and the search for meaning for future generations. So their words are prophetic. The new diaspora or diasporic communities, their words are prophetic. These are deep, passionate, and insightful words that have to be spoken out loud so that people can ruminate on their meaning for their lives. Understanding the new ontology of the diaspora will be important for us to look at diaconal ministries and the human condition at the present age. Since we mentioned Hong Kong earlier, let me use the case of Hong Kong as an illustration. 2019 was a year of awakening for Hong Kongers. When months-long pro-democracy protests were met with waves of repressive measures and police brutality, Hong Kongers felt betrayed by their own people. Hopes were blasted and shattered, dreams falling like shards of glass. Hong Kongers are living in the fragments. Once a city full of life and energy, it's now sorrowfully marked with scars and tears. Even the term Hong Konger has become politically charged. For this very self-reflective identity expresses a collective consciousness that came into direct confrontation with state ideology and power. Fearful of a looming political persecution, many are leaving everything behind to go into exile. Talks about the Hong Kong exodus had cropped up swiftly after Britain was finally willing to fulfill its legal and moral responsibility for Hong Kong. Hong Kong was formerly a British colony. The Home Secretary of the United Kingdom offered a special route to citizenship for Hong Kongers. An estimated 5.4 million Hong Kong residents will be eligible to move to the UK and follow a pathway to UK citizenship. The figure that 5.4 million Hong Kong residents can apply for citizenship in the UK was staggering because it represents 3/4 of the city's total population. Not all would take flight. It also is not the first time that large numbers of Hong Kong residents decided to move to other countries. The 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre and the 1997 handover were critical factors that pushed and forced people to leave, bolstering the existing diasporic community. The exodus triggered by the recent struggle for liberation and fight for democracy causes grave concern. Hundreds of thousands of Hong Kongers have been planning to move, though involuntarily, to countries where respective political systems have protect civil liberties and encourage citizens to participate in public decision-making as a result of Beijing's tightening control of Hong Kong. The city's divisive politics has been tearing families apart. Many who support pro-democracy protests found their communication cut off with their families and friends who have vowed loyalty to the puppet government. Churches also are divided along political lines. Some church leaders did play a crucial role during the protest, and the involvement of the church in politics had drawn Beijing's criticism. Christians supporting the democratic movement are worried about the future of the church in Hong Kong. Limiting religious freedom and controlling religious messages are likely to happen. This place of home becomes distant now more than ever as local authorities have increasingly adopted the authoritarian language of Beijing. Diasporic Hong Kongers consider resistance and achieving liberation as their primary mission. Mission of this nature actually unites people across Christian denominations, religions, and even those who claim to have no religious preferences or affiliation. Their diasporic experience, which is embodied with both a sense of shared suffering and a desire for human flourishing, intensifies the entangled process of identity making and remaking. The term diasporic Hong Kongers suggests that their diasporic experience is more than a geographical expression, but a people's movement to say no to state ideology and violence. In the meantime, it highlights the liminality of diasporic Hong Kongers in the face of aggressive assimilation and culturally insensitive rhetoric in their host societies. By rejecting the unwanted identity, Hong Kongers are finding every way to resist the othering mechanism and rewrite the master narratives about who they are. Different kinds of campaigns have been initiated and organized by Hong Kong diasporas to defend core values of Hong Kongers as well as promote a resistant movement. According to We the Hong Kongers campaign based in the United States, the Congress has pledged support to Hong Kongers' fight for freedom. Campaign organizers endeavored to make explicit their political stance by encouraging members of the diaspora to put in Hong Konger in the write-in box on 2020 census. Similar campaign took place among the Hong Kong diasporic communities in Canada when they responded to the 2021 census. From the effort to differentiate themselves from their Chinese counterparts to their acts of persuading respective governments to officially recognize Hong Kong as a people, diasporic Hong Kongers are trying to remake themselves as a political subject. To boldly express their identity and aspirations, diasporic Hong Kongers are redefining their diasporic space in which diasporic subjectivity needs to be recognized. Diasporic Hong Kongers are filled with new energies as they continue to advocate for human rights and to facilitate transnational collaboration for upholding the dignity of being Hong Kongers, which helps to reframe the narrative of being Hong Kongers both at home and abroad. Diaspora, in this case, diasporic Hong Kongers, has provided a productive frame for reimagining locations, movements, identities, and social formations that further provides a new perspective to diaconia amidst rising authoritarianism. First of all, an ongoing and contested process of subject formation has accelerated a new form of connectedness between the homeland and the dispersed elsewhere, the dispersed everywhere. The interconnectivity functions to deconstruct the conceptualization of diaspora by questioning the discourse in which a dispersed community or network are oriented around a single point of origin or homeland. The movements of people are neither linear nor defined by conventional geographical divides. Rather, the movements are becoming polyphatic and decentered and having lateral connections. Diaspora, it's not limited to those scattered tribes originated from one single population in a single location. People can connect with one another within the same geographical place, and yet at the same time, they also interact with other groups across geographical and cultural linguistic lines. The new form of connectedness brought forth by the diaspora calls for repositioning diaconal ministries within the context of the global community. Such a repositioning inevitably leads to respacing the contour of diaconal ministries. People are displaced, but not static. They are displaced and not static, and so are diaconal ministries. Diaconal ministries move as people move. The interconnectivity among the exile or displaced expands the spatial limits of diaconal ministries. Working among the exile or displaced means to working with other groups of communities simultaneously. It could be the various diasporic communities in a single location, and it could also be the communities across borders and boundaries. Diaconal ministries are porous, but never parochial. This statement not only affirms the theological perspectives put forward by the WCC about a decade ago that says every Christian community in every geopolitical and socioeconomic context is called to be a diaconal community, witnessing to God's transforming grace through acts of service that hold forth the promise of God's kingdom. But it also encourages every Christian community to be ready to work with people across geographical and cultural linguistic lines. Based on the expansive nature of the diasporic communities, diasporans find themselves being challenged and enriched by the insights and wisdom of others in their new settings. They find new language to express themselves that further promotes the process of rethinking who they are, thus contributing to the new discovery of self. In his essay entitled Cultural Identity and Diaspora, Stuart Hall emphasized the importance of difference, heterogeneity, and hybridity as necessary components for the formation of a diasporan self. Hall points out diaspora identities are those which are constantly producing and reproducing themselves anew through transformation and difference. Here comes the second observation. Diaconal ministries are neither limited to relief work nor providing material goods that meet immediate needs. Diaconia will take seriously the affirmation of self and selfhood of the displaced bodies if diaconia pays attention to a holistic transformation of self. The identity of those who are in exile or displaced is often subjected to a process of forceful redefinition and distortion, opposed to being rigidly redefined and confined to any unwelcoming category of the other. Diaspora itself is a subject that represents an intensified struggle for selfhood growing out of state violence, dehumanizing policies, broken promises, and rising tensions from within and without, and an urgency to seek new meanings to orient people's lives in the time of crisis. The displaced bodies are longing to thrive as who they are, that further underlies the aspiration of being a people of their own. Knowing the people in their concrete political and socio-economic realities will help theologians, church leaders, and practitioners to better understand the people's suffering. Only those whose bodies have been tear-gassed, traumatized, and deteriorized can tell how comforting it is when their voice is being heard. Being the exilic and uprooted people, these people have lived and embodied the tradition of truth-telling. In the midst of rising authoritarianism, truth-telling means saying no to imperialist ideology. This prophetic voice should awaken us all to the fact that earthly authorities cannot give people any real sense of security, certainty, and hope. Diakonia stands in the juncture and is born out of this very juncture where multiple struggles meet, intersect, and entangled within a linear progression of historical reality. Diakonia at the edge through the diasporic lens brings people back to the solidaristic life praxis of Jesus, and we all are interconnected at the foot of the cross. Not only does the cross bring the displaced bodies together, but it affirms the selfhood of the people by speaking against the discourse that aims to erase difference and otherness. It is this theological grounding that rebases churches and the ecumenical movement in our diaconal endeavors, in special regard to struggling for freedom and liberation. To conclude, being united in Christ, the prophetic nature of diakonia, and the prophetic voice of the displaced bodies should open new avenues for divine compassion and Christological perspectives of salvation and deliverance amidst hopelessness. Working sincerely with the diasporic other will enrich the imaginative construction of diakonia and diaconal practice, which is an indispensable step toward genuine solidarity in a globalized world. So this is a work in progress. I welcome any thoughts and ideas and comments and feedback. Thank you so much for being patient with me and you're listening to this presentation.